Jan, it's so good to have you here in Nature's Newsroom. For those of us who do not know you around the world, will you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do?
Thanks so much, Femi. Yeah, I'm Jad Daley. I'm the president and CEO of American Forests. American Forests is the oldest forest conservation organization in America. We're founded in 1875. I'm also the co-chair of the Forest Climate Working Group, which is the largest forest sector coalition in the United States, and also the co-chair of the U.S. chapter of 1T.org, the global Trillion Trees platform that was launched by the World Economic Forum in 2020. So I've been working on these issues for a long time and working with a lot of different folks, over 160 different organizations across those two coalitions that I just mentioned.
Jad, it feels like this is a really positive time for forest conservation, or at least announcements about forest conservation. Your take?
100%. You know, I have to tell you, 15 years ago when we started the Forest Climate Working Group, we couldn't get arrested. There was just not a lot of interest in forest and climate change. It was seen as a side skirmish in the climate conversation. And I think this COP is where forests have arrived as a top-tier climate change solution. Now look, there are a couple reasons for that, and I actually just wrote a piece in the World Economic Forum blog on this purpose, or this topic, that everyone is coming to realize that forests are a powerful climate solution in terms of sequestering carbon and slowing climate change. And just to give the statistics, clarify a little of the confusion out there, that's not a hypothesis. That's not something that might happen. In the United States, based on US EPA data, our forests capture and store about 16% of our carbon dioxide emissions every year. 16%. But what's really exciting is that the science is also unmistakably clear that that can go up or it can go down, depending on our actions. Because climate change is working against us, right? Climate change is harming our forests in ways that could erode its capacity to capture and store carbon. And so we need to play what we like to call carbon offense and carbon defense. We need to do things like plant trees that increase the carbon capture in our forests, but we also need to help protect them from threats like wildfire that can actually leak carbon out of our forests. And if we do those things, we could perhaps as much as double the carbon dioxide capture in our forests.
We're so used to our forests being carbon sinks.
Yes.
But they are now beginning to become carbon sources.
Yes.
What has gone wrong there?
Well, and I want to say two things here. First of all, they are becoming carbon sources in places, which I want to come back to that number I just gave you. In the United States, on net, our forests in total capture and store 16% of our carbon emissions on an annual basis. So even though you are seeing in some places that increase in emissions from wildfire, for example, on the whole, our forests are still a winner for climate change. But you're absolutely right. They'd be an even bigger force for solving climate change if we can get on top of things like this wildfire crisis. Now, let me give folks a statistic that's kind of shocking. In the United States, the extent of wildfire has doubled in the last few decades. Imagine that. Doubled. So that's millions more acres per year of forest that we're losing to wildfire. And that's both a source of carbon emissions. In fact, we have 6 western states that are now a net source of carbon emissions because they're losing so many forests to mortality and wildfire. But look, after these forests burn, they become a threat to communities. Burned over areas trigger mudslides. They don't filter our water in the right ways. And so it's just a loser across the board if we can't get on top of this wildfire crisis. And healthy and resilient forests are the solution to climate change on multiple levels.
Finally, Jad, and just briefly, we have an infrastructure bill that will become law for the United States, where trees are viewed as infrastructure. Political leaders at COP26 have said we will protect our forests. What does this really mean on the ground?
Boy, I'm so proud to say that the United States is stepping into this challenge. We all heard President Biden's big announcement of what the United States is going to do internationally earlier this week. But with the infrastructure bill that passed over the weekend in the United States, that commits $8.6 billion to address our wildfire crisis. $2.67 billion of that is for reforestation, both reforesting those burned areas I talked about, but other kinds of reforestation like mine lands and reforesting former agricultural areas. So a huge move on forests for climate in that infrastructure bill. And here's the really exciting thing. The Build Back Better Act that's right behind it has $30 billion for all those purposes that I just mentioned, and importantly to my organization, almost $3 billion for tree equity in our cities. So we can make sure that every neighborhood in our communities has the natural cooling and air quality that trees provide, which is especially important in the face of climate change.
Jad Daley, thank you for making time for Nature's Newsroom. Appreciate you.
Thanks.